is there a potential business model here? The way for this type of business model to deliver the best possible results to consumers is to use medical grade ingredients. And we spent a lot of time with professionals from the healthcare industry and advisors just navigating what we call this complex coordination, because we're pulling a few different pieces together, right? And then on top of all of that, we also had to build a brand and a team and the ability to get this out there to the whole country as fast as we could. I mean, the most fulfilling part of building the company has been how many countless messages we get from people telling us what their situation was before they discovered us and how much it's improved their life.
So, James Mishreki, welcome to Healthtech Podcast, founder of Skin+Me. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me, James.
You're very welcome. Looking forward to getting into this, man. I think the scale that Skin+Me has managed to achieve in healthcare it's not only admirable, but it's something that I think the whole healthcare industry should look to. I think aspiring entrepreneurs, I would love it if people looked to the scale and success that you've had with Skin+Me and thought, how can we do things similar? And so what I'm really looking forward to in this chat that we're having is to go into how you did it, a bit of the origin story, and thinking about how you build companies, how you take ideas to reality, and interestingly, how you then hand them off to a team, how you hire a team in order to do that, and thinking about what is quite a gap in the market, an interesting business model. And so, yeah, really looking forward to going into all of that stuff with you. First of all, how are you? Where are you speaking to us from?
Yeah, well, I'm in Dublin for a few days.
Nice.
Not that much warmer than the UK, but it's it's been a good start of the year. I'm gearing up to launch a new brand, which is super exciting.
Interesting.
So I can maybe share a bit more about that later on. But yeah, Skin+Me and the other brands we've launched have been performing super well, and we're planning out a pretty big year for that company.
It's really exciting, man. So, the first question I tend to ask on this is tell us your story. So, where does this all begin for you? I mean, you mentioned to me just now that your brother's a doctor, your dad's a doctor, and so healthcare must have been talked about around the dinner table. So, what was your childhood like? Were you always born entrepreneur? Were you starting companies as a child and selling things to schoolmates and things, or was entrepreneurship something you came to a bit later?
Yeah, I think for me, it's either in your blood or it isn't. So I always knew, I used to say when I was very young, say, when I grow up, I'm going to be a businessman. Once I got over the fact that I wanted to be a pop star, but I couldn't sing.
How's your voice? Were you watching The X Factor and thinking that's going to be me?
She didn't realize my age. This is way before The X Factor. Anyway, I was always starting businesses in school from even age 13. You know, I'd use my pocket money to buy like blank CDs, and I got a CD-ROM burner for my birthday. So that was like, you know, the CapEx came from my birthday present, and then I was able to sell any CDs in school, and that was my little business. And I was always tinkering with something, and I always kind of knew I wouldn't go down a traditional path.
And so what happened to bring you towards your first proper company then? So how did that emerge? What was the driving force and the idea, and how did you turn your first proper company into reality?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that I did go to university because I wasn't sure what else to do at that point. And I do regret that. You know, I lost 3 years there.
Regret's quite a strong word.
Yeah, well, if I could do it again, I wouldn't go, because I never used the degree, and I just set up my own companies, and the stuff that I learned on the business degree wasn't helpful for starting a business. Obviously, had fun, great memories, great friends. But after university, I started playing poker professionally. I'd always been quite obsessed with it. And interestingly, there is quite a lot of parallels that take you from poker into being an entrepreneur. You're basically making decisions with imperfect information, like all day, every day. It's exactly the same as running a company. And so after the poker days, I then started a business with like 2 other co-founders in online like data collection. We built this B2B software that would track thousands of websites, and we'd aggregate information on like retail pricing and retail products, track when companies dropped prices and added new products, and other retailers would pay us for that data.
Mm.
Because at the time they were tracking it themselves. Like people in their teams were literally clicking. If they worked at House of Fraser, they'd be clicking through John Lewis's website to see,
Wow.
have they changed this like KitchenAid artisan mixer price? And so it's just bonkers. So we helped them automate things like that, and that basically took a lot of time, like 6 to 7 years of building that company as a bootstrap business before even thinking about getting into the consumer world with Skin and Me.
Can we talk about the poker for just a little bit? So you mentioned that the parallels. I wouldn't like to be in a negotiation with you as someone with clearly a poker face, but um, what what was your route into that, and what made you stop and I guess do something arguably more concrete, but it depends how good you were, I guess.
Yeah, well, not good enough, which is actually something I'm quite glad about. I've thought about this recently because I I didn't know until like a year ago. I mean, I've always had friends and girlfriends tell me I've got ADHD, but I thought, well, just out of interest, I'll do a test. And yeah, I very much have the inattentive form of ADHD,
Mm,
and you know what I think? I think that my sort of baseline stimulation of like normal is like pretty low. So for me, taking certain risks, it's not that scary. Whereas I think it might be scary for people that don't have that type of ADHD. And so for me, when I was young, I just always loved playing poker. I loved the tense moments of bluffing someone and putting your money on the line and not knowing if it was going to work out. And so I think that made it for me a pretty easy sort of um, career, if you'd call it, to take up for a bit of time. Ultimately, poker, went through quite a curve of adoption, and in America, we call them the fish. Like you basically you need players that aren't very good in the game, otherwise there's no margins for winning and making a career out of it. But there've been the glory days. Then I took up poker, and America was basically cramping down regulatory wise in a lot of states. So you couldn't really, the player pool was just on average much better than it was in the
right.
glory days.
Sure.
And on top of that, people were using poker training websites and so on and so forth. The rakes were going up. So it was just a harder game to beat. And even a good friend of mine that had been making just crazy money for someone fresh out of university, he was already planning to hang his boots up. And so
Wow.
I'm very glad that I didn't have, I mean, I was 21 at the time. If I'd won a
Yeah.
big tournament for like a million or something like that, I probably never would have stopped playing. Because I would have thought, okay, this is me
The
set.
prize is there.
So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that nothing like that happened. And ultimately, I realized from a social perspective, just the idea of sat playing a
Mm,
game online, as much as I love the game,
mm,
yeah, it doesn't really expose you to the joys of life in a lot
mm.
of ways. And I love working with people and solving problems with
That's
them. And it's a
interesting.
very isolated game.
Were you better playing online or in person?
I've always preferred in person, but
Is that because is that your ability to read people or?
yeah, it's just more exciting trying to bluff someone and having to hide that you're bluffing in person. It's much easier to do that online. The benefit of playing online is the rate of hands per hour you can get is,
Yeah, of course.
exponentially more than live.
Of course. God, the
If
VCs
you
don't
if
stand a
you play,
chance in a
James,
negotiation with you.
I
I played
I
a
run a
little bit.
game in
I played a
London,
little bit
so
at uni, but it's interesting actually when you say that your attitude to the risk and the stress is that anyone half decent at poker would know immediately if I had a good hand because physiologically I'm like forget like a flush on the table and my face is incredibly flushed like and my
yeah, yeah.
heart rate's gone up and I can't suppress it so just physiologically I'm definitely not built for that kind of high stress and actually I just don't have the relationship with those moments to turn it into enjoyment because I'm more thinking what's the risk on me? I might lose the hand. It might put me in a position where now I'm just on the way out and then I get to lose the get. Like I'm far more and I'm like this with sport as well. Like I care far more about avoiding loss than I do about going after a win. And it's quite it's just a really strange, I guess, quirk of my just the way my mind works. And I've heard like people like Roy Keane say the same thing, that he cared more about avoiding a loss than going towards a win. But seemingly, success can be driven by either thing, right? You can fear loss or you can love the win. I think I'm far more the fearing the loss, which is quite interesting. But um, yeah, it's funny the parallels between business. Then obviously you're adapting to those moments in business and changing one for the other. Is there anything else that comes to mind in terms of playing poker and doing business?
Well, I think ultimately in both poker and business, you just have to do your best and detach from the outcome because you don't actually control it. You can do your best, but you know, like running a startup, it can be, it's brutal. And sometimes you'll see your friend that started 18 months ago and they just got acquired for 9 figures and it might drive you crazy. And like you aren't fully in control of that. And so the market will decide. And as long as you just keep learning from your mistakes, that's the best you can do. But eventually variance will go in your favor.
Nice. So after the first company, you got an exit from the first company, is that right? And then
Yeah.
you went on to Skin+Me. Yeah. So what at the point of exiting that company, then obviously, well, actually, talk me through the first exit. How did you feel at that exit? You were thinking, this life changing money? Is this life? What shall I do? Like people talk about exit in different ways. They talk about a lack of purpose sometimes. They talk about being able to then turn their focus towards something more meaningful. How did you feel at exit, and plot the path between that and moving into healthcare for me?
Yeah, it definitely didn't set me up like long term for life. It gave
Sure.
me a really strong foundation of cash, which
Yeah.
meant that when I was looking for my next business, I knew that I had time on my side, and B, I could self fund the new company.
Mm,
So that was very liberating. But no, it was like nowhere near enough for me to not be hungry anymore. So yeah, I mean, if anything, I think I would have preferred to have exit that company like a year or two earlier, even for less money. But I feel like I refer to it as a quote unquote zombie business because it started to perform well, but it was never going to be a breakout because the market got so competitive, and it's really hard to have like an unfair advantage in that space, and the market
mm,
just got a bit too saturated. So yeah, look, it served its purpose, and when I basically moved to London right after that, and I was all in like a full-time job, just focused on looking for like a network of people that had sold companies, invested in startups, and so on. So I knew for my next venture, I wanted to go down a different route. I wanted to raise money, which means giving up some control, but I knew I wanted the opportunity to move much faster and build for scale from the get-go.
mm. And so, why healthcare then? Because of all the of all the easy places to build companies, you wouldn't have healthcare as one of them. So, was that more calling and purpose, or did you actually spot did you spot the gap in the market and go from there?
Yeah, well, in the category that we started in, which was skin, I'd had a lot of experience myself, having had really severe acne through
Mm, okay.
school, and every teen boy that has bad acne, there's always a bit of bullying goes on. It's quite debilitating, and it came back for me in my early to mid 20s as well. So I'd had that personal experience of how much it can affect you. Me and my co-founder at the time were spending a lot of time experimenting in the skincare category. Fascinating industry, very high gross margins, low return rates, and a growing market. And so those factors mean that there's a lot of scope to just build something exciting if you can get product market fit. But what we realized were, well, there's this massive market of people that are largely dissatisfied. Nearly $200 billion market, but most people, more than 50% of people, are not happy with what they buy. So they just keep going out to try other products that don't really work for them. And so I guess when we discovered that stat, it was, it set off a bit of a trail of experimentation for me and my co-founder at the time. And, we were looking at some of these companies that were doing online, quote unquote, personalization, but it didn't really mean much. It was basically just a quiz on a website that would push you to certain products.
Mm.
And, we started, brainstorming on our whiteboard a lot of different business models. And I was always going back to like my experience with acne, where, I mean, in the UK, if you have acne, you basically either go to the high street and you buy like a brand like Clearasil, which has limited efficacy, or you have to go to see a GP. And GPs normally get, a couple of weeks training in dermatology. Or if they refer you, you can be waiting 6 months because there's
Mm.
only a few hundred dermatologists in the UK. It's
Yes.
not like the US and, 70 million people. So you might be waiting many, many months. And even when you do see a dermatologist, you'll be prescribed a generic treatment that wasn't made just for you. It was made in mass production and been sitting on a shelf. And it's not like you can message the dermatologist every other, if you have a reaction or you're concerned after a few days, you can't WhatsApp them or phone them and ask questions and share pictures. You're kind of left to it. Sure, if there's an emergency, you can go and see them, but it felt like there was just a breakdown in, all these
Mm.
skincare companies trying to do personalization, but everyone's unhappy. And you got people with superficial skin conditions like acne that, have an ineffective high street, or a frankly slow and non-ideal in terms of like customer experience.
And a huge drive to solve the problem from those individuals as well. Huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone sees your face every time you go
This is
out,
the
and
thing. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
everyone wants to have as clearer and healthier skin as possible.
Mm.
So that was kind of the genesis, really. And then me and my co-founder spent a lot of time trying to figure out, okay, is there a potential business model here? So we set up some tests online. We threw money at it. We were shipping boxes out to people. We were testing different ways of personalizing the skincare journey, but ultimately concluded that the way for this type of business model to work, the way for it to deliver the best possible results to consumers is to use medical grade ingredients.
Yeah.
And then you're getting the benefits of what you get through going to see your doctor, but you're getting them in a personalized way, but true personalization, not like the website quizzes.
Mm.
And you're getting better performance, like dramatically better performance, which is clinically proven in comparison to the high street brands like Clearasil. And
Mm.
so that was what we then set out to engineer. How could we combine that personalization with prescription grade ingredients in a way that's just been, dramatically leveled up compared to people's current expectations?
I've got so many questions on this. This is fascinating about how you set that up. The first thing I just want to say at this point though is I can remember when I was on my GP placement, right? And I was an F2, so second year doctor, and I had a call through on my phone from reception saying there's someone extremely angry. You're the only one free. They've just come through. They're going to barge through the door any second. And as she said that, like they came through the door, and I'm a junior doctor at this point, and just sort of put the phone out. Just how can I help? Is everything okay? And and I sympathise greatly. It's the father of a girl. His daughter had come in previously. The pharmacist had called her in. Pharmacist at the GP had called her in to basically say that the medication that she was on, the specific formulation of it, which was I think there's 2 or 3 different medications in this one solution that she was using on her skin, which was working, was actually too expensive for this GP practice, is what this GP pharmacist told them, and that they were going to have to go onto 3 separate solutions to use, but it should be the same effect. And this gentleman basically said that at the time said that, well, we've tried all those before, it hasn't worked. What are you basically telling me that you're not going to pay for this, even though you know it's going to work for my daughter? Anyway, they came off the medication. His daughter's skin went absolutely awful, and he literally burst through my door begging. I'm being like genuine, begging to please go back onto this because it was ruining his daughter's life. And it was an incredibly difficult situation because the pharmacist had spoken to me beforehand and said, we can't put them back on. And I'm just stuck between a rock and a hard place here, where I've got an incredibly upset family, someone's life literally being ruined. I'm like not being dramatic by saying that. And a system in which the solution is literally there, it's available, but this person can't access it. It's just really difficult. Um, and that was actually what I had in mind when I asked you to come on this podcast, actually, because that I just wanted to tell you that story because I think that's the problem that you were solving, and I just felt connected to like what you guys are doing because of that moment, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah, I mean, there's been just countless. I mean, the most fulfilling part of building the company has been how many countless messages we get from people telling
Mm,
us what their situation was before they discovered us and how much it's improved their life. Some people, and also it opens your mind to just how much it affects people. I remember how bad it was being
yeah.
bullied as a teen. Like no one wants it. You want to get to know girls and all that when you're turning 15, 16, and some of these messages we get are people that can't let their husband see them without
Mm.
makeup on and haven't in years, and
Oh.
we've given them a new lease of life because they've been able to get through this. But yeah, I think the access that we've created through building an online model where you get assessed right away, we have a team of people there, you get the
Mm.
product shipped out to you if you're suitable for treatment
Yeah.
very quickly. It's something that we really wanted to obsess over because the current system that most people have to deal with
Mm.
is not that.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I want to go on to now, actually, is that you mentioned all the things that you did to immerse yourself in the startup ecosystem after you sold your company down in London, and everything that you did to kind of understand what was going on and how to meet certain people and network and all that kind of thing. For the early stage founders listening, I actually just want to bring this up and get you to talk about this a little bit of how did you meet your co-founder? Because one of the one of the questions I get so often is how do I meet a co-founder and all the rest of it. And my answer always tends to just come down to it will be a serendipitous moment, but you've got to do the work and actually to understand everything about the problem that you want to solve, understand who's going to be the yin to your yang, and to understand what complementary skills they're going to need. All of these things is just it's time, it's work, it's effort, is what I tend to say. But there will probably be a serendipitous moment or moments that lead to that. But I'm interested how you met your co-founder in this.
Yeah, well, I moved to London and didn't really have much of a network at all,
Yeah.
like in the startup world. So I knew that was my biggest disadvantage. So I basically, like I said, I'd been through my exit. I allocated a few months to pursuing this network building strategy, and I treated it like a startup.
Months. Mm,
Yeah, yeah, about 4 to 6 months, and so it was like full time, all
mm,
day, every day. Just and I basically mapped uh, the whole ecosystem through using LinkedIn and all sorts of lists. And I would just aggressively hammer every single person that had built a startup, that had an exit, had invested in startups. And, I would get, I don't know, a moderate response rate, but the
mm,
actual percentage of people that I was able to meet was pretty low. But it was so worth it because A, I met my co founder through it. B, I met some investors that ended up becoming my first investors in Skin+Me. And it helped me just get to know very smart people. I also, as part of that, actually, I had this idea where I was going to, you know, if your calling card is just, "Hey, I'm a founder and I want to meet other founders," people get a lot of messages like that. I do, but I built this group and I called it the Jam Group, and we were going to get together once a month and just jam on different business ideas. And so I was reaching out to some people, say, "Hey, I've got this event coming up at the weekend, and I would book at this hotel in Shoreditch," and it was a real thing. And so I would reach out to people to want to come to it, and some people would come, and there was like fascinating discussion there, and that's actually what led to me finding my co-founder.
Oh,
But
really?
then,
Wow.
but then other people were like, "Oh, I can't come to that, but it sounds cool. Yeah, let's grab a coffee or something." And so I just like went from no network to 6 months later, like a significant network that enabled me to start a business, raise money, and just had, I guess, more exposure to different
Yeah.
business models and ideas
Yeah.
and so on.
Love it. It's funny how we're coming back round to that in the world now. Like, I think we went through this phase of like meetup.com back in the day, which seemed to be
Mm.
like a really good thing. And I can remember doing some of that stuff. What was that like?
Yeah, me
Maybe
too.
like 13, 15, about 15 years ago,
Yeah,
meetup.com now,
yeah.
wasn't it? And doing all that wave. And then we went through this quite like individualistic phase of everyone working remotely and locking the doors and having a pandemic and all that sort of stuff. It seems that the in real life stuff and finding a way to do that actually drags people out of the house to something now seems to be yeah, real high value stuff now again, and sort of nice and cool, and people want to do it again, which is quite nice. But no, thanks for sharing that. It is about doing the work, is what I wanted to put out there. But right, Skin and Me. So you discovered that you needed to be adjacent to the actual healthcare space here, the prescription element of the some of the things you're going to need to ship out to people in order to meet that personalization for what they actually need. Now, it's quite interesting this, because once you have that idea and you start pulling on that thread, I imagine having not been in the healthcare system was probably an advantage, because you know how you don't know how potentially complicated that might be, and so you can kind of look at it with fresh eyes. But I'm interested in how that went for you, the journey of understanding how you were going to interact with the healthcare system and actually set something up. Because, look, in the UK, calling a spade, we have the NHS, and anything that kind of either sits adjacent to the NHS or is paid for in some way, it gets messy and difficult, and I don't know, people get confused by it, and it can be not easy to set up for entrepreneurs in a way that ends up delivering a lot of value, which obviously you guys did with the scale that you achieved. So I'm just quite interested in how you went about that, how you learnt about it, and how you set it up to work like it did.
Yeah, it's a regulated category,
Yeah.
so it is complex, and it takes quite a bit of time to pull together the right people, and spend the time yourself to learn, how does the Medicines Act work, how does the system work, and when you're fresh to it, yeah, it has some advantages, but there was quite a curve to get up there.
Mm.
And so, the first person that we recruited was a consultant dermatologist, and we spent a lot of time with professionals from the healthcare industry and advisors, just navigating what we call this complex coordination, because we're pulling a few different pieces together,
Mm.
right? We had to do everything from build a pharmacy, build a factory, figure out what are the right treatment pathways, what are the skills that we need in the business to actually set this up. And then on top of all of that, we also had to build a brand and a team and the ability to get this out there to the whole country as fast as as we could.
And so, I mean, it's interesting. The first thing you mentioned there is we hired the right person. It seems like as an entrepreneur, if you're thinking of big scale, you can't think about doing everything yourself. And so, yes, the first person we hired was a consultant dermatologist. Is that your style? Is that your style to kind of either the classic hire people smarter than you and get out of your way? Is that something that you relate to?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the most important skill that you can learn as a founder. I'm still learning. It never ends. I'm reading a Steve Jobs book at the moment. He said getting better and better at it by the
Mm,
time he passed away. Right? It's the highest leverage skill that you need,
mm,
and I think a lot of founders might rush to, oh, I've got an idea. Let's like try to raise
mm,
some money or this and that, but they haven't, like, because it's brutally hard trying to bring together the right team, especially before you have credibility and track record.
mm,
But yeah, I think that more founders need to put that groundwork in. If you can't convince the very best people in the country to believe in you or to join you or invest in you or something like that very early on, then you there's something probably missing, right? So yeah, for us, there was a couple of like key targets that we had. He's like Ben, the consultant dermatologist. There were some other individuals from a similar background. Our very first investor was literally the number one person that we'd set out to target in the whole of the UK because he'd built and sold 3 subscription businesses before in the
Right.
UK. So he knew how to set them up with a vertically integrated operation. He didn't have the pharmacy and the medical experience, so we had to bring that in ourselves.
Mm.
But the combination of those two was critical, and so that was that was a real unlock for us,
Yeah.
and it always has been. And to be honest, it's something that I still put a ton of my time into, just nurturing like relationships I've got with potential future hires, future co-founders, future CEOs.
Yeah.
It kind of never ends.
Yeah. You alluded to this just now, actually. The like your role in this at the minute is in part balancing this new brand with its clinical rigor to some extent, to a great degree. That has to be that certainly has to be discoverable if people dig into it. But you've got the choice of whether you lead with it versus the consumer brand that's promising this, convenience. And you know convenience and healthcare often don't really play in the same thing, but it's what you ended up delivering, I guess, which is very interesting. Your job early on of balancing the two, how did you see that brand originally? Did you see yourself more as a consumer, more of a healthcare brand, and how did that change as the company grew?
Yeah, really good question because it changed even before we launched,
Oh,
to the
really?
extent that we worked with a branding agency and spent £65,000 of the first £250,000 that we raised on building a brand called Gleam. So
Right.
Gleam.
Oh, right.
That was the brand, and it was very sort of bright, poppy.
Well,
It was like
the name the name alone.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
quite aggressive with some of the tone of voice,
Mm.
and we used that to raise the money. So that was our brand, and we were known as Gleam. But we actually realized through that journey that we made a mistake, and we'd made it too. It was too far on the consumer end, and
What were the
actually our
what were the
product was
indicators of that? Sorry to interrupt. What were the indicators of that?
just talking to lots more and more brand people once we'd
Fine.
created the brand, doing some testing with consumers,
Mm.
and ultimately just trying to have like honest conversations with ourselves. The more people we brought into the business, the more smart debates we'd have, and we
Right.
realized we're taking a bit of a risk with the brand as Gleam because the product is so differentiated that it doesn't need this like over the top differentiation from a brand perspective. And to your point, we need to balance. Yes, it needs to be appealing, right? But it shouldn't look like the little white paper bags you get from a pharmacy. But so it needs to be appealing, but it does have to convey real credibility. This is a medical product and people need to fully trust it. So we went through a rebranding process, and part of the decision actually to settle on Skin+Me, which was a highly contested. I was CEO at the time, and it was a hard decision to make because it was very much a divisive name at the time. I'm very glad we picked it in the end, but the plus really communicated that it was pharmaceutical, and we started using the plus in lots of different ways across the brand, and
Mm.
it set a new tone for the company. And ultimately, we've learned that as a brand, we can tell you lots of important information, but who do you listen to the most? You listen to real people that are telling their experience and their story. And so because the product works so well and the service is really high quality, we get a lot of people unprompted that share their experience. And we only when we do like direct partnerships, we only do it with people that are real customers, that have had
Mm.
real results, that are
Mm.
speaking from the heart,
Mm.
and people buy into that. And once we started to have an abundance of that, that's kind of what started to drive the flywheel more so than us just telling people what it does.
Interesting. It's such a fascinating space for me. The space between the consumer and getting what they need in healthcare that will bypass GP. We see a lot of online pharmacy and people can fill in, questionnaires and get sent stuff and in various that we see it in sexual health, we see it in a few other different places. Like these things do exist. But I'm interested, to explain to me and our listeners what your business actually is in terms of all of its component parts, because I think that people can assume wrongly that businesses like this, yeah, okay, you fill in an online questionnaire and there's probably just someone at the other end that puts things in a bag and then it gets sent to you and that's it. But as you've explained, there's online pharmacy, there's all these different things, probably CQC, and there's all these different parts of the business. So can you just sort of piece that jigsaw together for me in terms of what different component parts actually go into what is in entirety the product of Skin and Me?
Well, the reason that we had to raise £8 million right out of the gate is because there's a lot to do, right? In order to set this up for scale from the get go and meet all of the regulatory requirements and so on. So we needed a variety of skill sets. We needed the digital experience to build the consultation service online.
Mm,
Needed a great design skills, great technical skills. It's got to be able to handle thousands of people,
mm.
filling it in at one time. I mean, we were on This Morning, the TV show, just a few months after launching, and that led to signups were like this, and then it had a huge spike that morning, and so we needed to have great tech to cope with that. Then we needed to build out a team of prescribers that with custom tech that equips them with the right information for them to make their prescribing decisions and decide whether or not an individual is suitable for treatment or not. And then we had to build our facility, and the facility has everything in it, from the actual production of the creams that get prescribed to the machinery that we've had to build in house in order to fill the daily doser, which is this custom bottle that we develop to make sure every time you dispense, you're getting a fixed dermatologist designed dose of treatment, which is something people don't get from a tube of cream, all the way through to putting the box together with, if you've seen one of our boxes, it has your name on it and all of your custom information, and getting that shipped out. So it's a massive operation, requires a broad set of skills, and we had
Mm,
to pull a lot of that together before we even launched. So
mm.
unlike a lot of startups, we didn't have the option to just
Yeah.
test this out for 10 grand. It's not that type of business, and so it required a lot of risk in that regard. But we had such high conviction, as did our investors, that this was such a clear gap in the market that we took the risk. We raised a lot of money. We built everything for scale from the get-go in this way, and fortunately it did all click into place pretty quickly.
Yeah. So when you think about going end to end through that customer journey, and even you could include the knowledge of you doing all of that stuff if that does find its way into the consumer journey somewhere, what are the areas of that journey that you think build the most trust? And the reason I ask that is because I think early on, late on, and you build brand and you've got case study and track record and all the rest of it. My friends use it, my family use it. It's great and blah blah. Like I get it. That it's easy to trust a brand once it gets to that level. Early on, and yes, having a This Morning slot will do that. The authority, the credibility of being able to be selected and go on there, that'll definitely do you wonders. But what do you think builds the trust for people to engage in this online consultation and get what they need, and what are the elements of your brand that deliver that trust, with trust being so important in healthcare?
Yeah, well, I think back to my answer on the branding, the reason that we shifted from Gleam to being Skin and Me is
Mm,
because we realized the importance of conveying the clinical nature of the business. And
yeah.
so combining that, brand pillar of clinical authority with a growing team of medical professionals. And we brought in, it wasn't just Ben, the first consultant dermatologist. We brought in Malvina, another dermatologist, Jason, another dermatologist, and just built out that team and made sure that they were very much surfaced when it came to
Right.
our website and all of our
Right.
comms. We started putting content out there on our social media and in all sorts of places. We encouraged people to leave a Trustpilot review if they were one of our early customers. And so
Mm,
because people were having such a great experience, we could point to that. These are real people grading it 5 stars. And I think that combination gave people confidence. I also think, our marketing was appealing. We would also run some offers in the early days of the online service where people could try it out for just a few pounds instead of paying like a full month's price. And that lowered the barrier to entry for people. And so in the early days, that combination helped us build up a bit of momentum. And then once
Mm,
the snowball was moving, it was yeah, it grew faster and faster.
mm. Interesting. For you and your investors, thinking about the relationship between your customer acquisition costs and your clinical quality, or even just your running costs and the clinical quality, the more clinicians are very expensive beasts, and what that can do to unit economics and things, people find it difficult to find these types of business models in healthcare. How easy was it for you to find that business model, especially, by the way, when you're adding this word personalization? You've mentioned true personalization, so maybe not standardization or smart standardization. You talk about personalization. So all these things chip away, don't they, at margin and unit economics. So how did you think about the business model and setting that up to scale?
Yeah, well, first of all, we could only get money from our investors if we had a very compelling 5-year plan that showed that we deeply understood what the costs of bringing these individuals in,
Yeah.
what the cost per customer was going to be, and how that would model over time. But one of the advantages that we had to build into the business, or that we knew would give us competitive advantage and give us more wiggle room on unit economics, is building a vertically integrated operation. So most startups
Mm,
don't have that optionality, right? Because they don't have the right skills in house.
yeah.
So for us, we recruited a number of people that had been at a company called Graze beforehand, which is was basically one of the pioneers of subscription. And so they
Yeah.
they built like the little
Yeah, I
punnets of
remember.
nuts
Yeah.
you'd get in the post,
Yeah, I
and they
remember.
built a highly efficient factory operation. And so we recruited some people like that knew how to build very efficient factories, combined that with the farmer experience that we recruited into the business.
Mm,
And because of that combination, it meant that we were building in house. We weren't paying a third party, so the margin that we have on the product is higher than it would be if we were outsourcing it, and that gave us more flex. And I'd say that like efficiency operationally is an absolute strength of our team and our business, and that just means that we can make the model work, and it makes it harder for someone else to try to come
mm,
in and outcompete us.
mm. And I want to talk about personalization. So, personalization in healthcare is, for the last few years, 10 years maybe, it's been this word that has been thrown around as it's what we want. What we want is personalization. And especially with advances in genomics and things like that, and people talking about um, mapping genomes and assessing how much of a certain medication you can have, and this type of personalization being what we're considering as like a goal or whatever it is. How do you view personalization in healthcare in terms of where we are now and what you wanted to achieve? And is that what we want? Is true personalization per patient, is it what we want? Is it what's achievable? And is that somewhat in your thesis for what you want to do long term?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I think why would you choose to have a generic way of getting treatment and information if you could have it tailored to you? And I think
Cost
with
at
the
scale is the answer, isn't it? It's like when you've got a health system, it sort of has to, in order to, especially a public healthcare system, it sort of has to. I think that's probably the answer.
yeah, yeah. I mean, we've had the luxury of, yeah, I'm not like criticizing the NHS in that regard, because we've had the luxury of starting from a blank canvas and going after very specific verticals.
Mm,
And so we can like deliver a dramatically better and more personalized customer experience. But I think the more innovation that happens doing this, and the more access to data through all sorts of, whether it be wearables or testing, all the biomarker testing that's happening, I absolutely think there's going to be convergence between that and more treatments. I'm super excited about it. I think we're in the future, in maybe 20, 30 years, a kid will grow up, and from the like being born, they've got all of their information tracked so that if their parents want to, they can have them on perfect diet and all of this stuff to maximize their long-term health. Whereas at the moment, I mean, I was from a medical family, but I was eating, Rice Krispies and Pop Tarts when I was a little kid, and don't think that was great for me. But yeah, I think also the ability to spot any potentially threatening conditions at a very early stage will be and then get appropriate treatment personalized to you will be just the norm. And I think
Mm.
youngsters will say to us, "What? You used to just go to a doctor and get something that everyone else got."
It is crazy to think. It is crazy to think when you look at the direction of travel. I think it is crazy to think that. I think it is gonna seem very, very bizarre that we did certain things so generically, especially when I've worked obviously as a doctor in healthcare, and you see the way that you know people, some patients on the wards have got these really big stacks of notes, and you look at their drug chart, and it's just what you'd call polypharmacy. It's just full of various medications for various things. A new symptom pops up, a new drug goes on. A new symptom pops up, a new drug comes on. And you can guarantee there's been no study of how all those drugs interact with each other in this exact way with someone with this genetics and that sort of thing. The level of data that we can have, the processing power that is available to us, the AI conversation. Goodness knows how we've got 3/4 into this without mentioning AI, but we have. But all of that side of the world as well, and how that's going to influence healthcare. It's crazy to think that we're practicing the way that we do, to be honest. I think, and that's only a good thing. I think we should be embarrassed of how we deliver healthcare every 6 months. We probably should. But it's like your website, right? Everyone's website should be embarrassing 6 months on because you haven't updated it and the company's gone so far. Like, it is just one of those things I think is going to be a marker of success for us in healthcare, to be honest, especially with, I don't know, OpenAI announced today, didn't they? They've now got ChatGPT Health or whatever is coming out. It's crazy the speed that this is all going. But let me ask you a couple of questions on Skin+Me before we move on to your next exciting project. How would you describe the relationship between Skin+Me and the NHS? Would you say it's a complement? Would you say it's a substitute? Would you say it's a pressure release valve? Because the reality is, for that person I saw in when I was doing GP, they had literally at the time no other alternative because this didn't exist, and so it's clear it solves a problem. I'm just interested in how you view it in terms of its adjacency to the NHS, and how you might think about partnerships with other healthcare or retail organisations and that side of things. Where does it sit with the NHS and other partners?
Well, our goal was to always make our service as accessible as possible from a price perspective.
Yeah,
And I think if you look at the value proposition, like what you get, in comparison to the alternative, if you want to get treated yourself, which is going, well, if you can afford to, going privately to see a
yeah,
dermatologist and paying hundreds just for your consultation,
yeah.
for a very short consultation, most people can't afford that, right? And so we've filled a gap in between the two where we've got a price as accessible as possible. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that, a while ago we crossed the million customers mark.
Wow.
And the UK is a pretty small country, and we're now shipping out millions of boxes per year. So it's clear that there's a value proposition that makes sense for people there versus the trade-off of money they maybe can't afford privately,
Mm.
or the time it takes through the NHS to get to get treatment that is not going to be as personalized and tailored to you.
Nice. My final question, James, is that you mentioned the phrase "I was CEO at the time." Um, what changed? And again, reason I ask is because I think, from people I've spoken to, from things I've seen, and even my own experience, you can be a very good CEO at a certain stage of company, and it's interesting. But things need to change, I think, quite a lot for companies, and so I'm interested in what you meant by that, and when you were CEO from and until, and yeah, what was behind the decision to change that.
Yeah, I mean, I was CEO at Skin+Me in the early years, and I think I know what I'm good at. I'm good at coming up with an idea, validating it, and bringing together the right people, the best people to put that idea out into the world, incentivizing them, assembling them, organizing them, and then going out to raise the capital that's needed to set the business up for success.
Mm.
And I can be the leader in those early days. Do I think I'm the best like long-term operational leader? No, I think like at Skin+Me, we have someone better than me doing that
Mm,
now. And if you look at Richard Branson with his companies, he's rarely been the long-term CEO. He's the CEO of the group, but he always brings
mm,
in an individual who he feels is more competent than him
mm,
to run the day-to-day operations. Um, I think there's just I still love like the early days in a way. I love setting that early culture. You need brutal honesty. You've got to move forward with like 65% confidence. And it's just incredibly exciting and energizing if
mm,
once you've brought that team together. But yeah, the long term growth of the business, I think I'm better at. At Skin+Me, I'm still the like main shareholder, and I've moved into chairman. But I'm now focusing on spinning up another company where I'm going to be chairman. I'm exec chairman. My co-founder is CEO, and that's how I'm trying to focus my energy going forward. I think that's how I can have the most impact.
nice. You said culture. You like setting up that culture. What do you? How would you have described the culture at Skin+Me in the early days? What do you think led to the success? Were there certain cultural elements of the way that things were run that you think, I don't know, spotted problems early and corrected them, or allowed you to go at certain speed, or kept clinical rigor, or like what? Are there any cultural elements that maybe founders listening that are in the early days can perhaps learn from in the way that they try and set up culture?
Yeah, well, everyone that you need to bring in early on just needs to have a real intensity about them and really be maniacally focused on what you're trying to achieve. And they should put it above everything else. And if you bring a team like that together, that's like the hardest box to check, I would say.
Mm,
And, when it comes to laying the groundwork to setting up the business, you've got to make a lot of decisions and you have to have a lot of debates with this team of obsessive people. And so they can get quite heated for the right reasons. And the most important thing is that the best ideas win and you don't give a damn who they come from. But everyone needs to have the comfort of just brutal honesty and really challenging each other and not being afraid to say it straight. We don't have time to beat around the bush and worry about hurting people's feelings. And if your feelings do get hurt because the group don't think your idea is the
mm,
best one and they give good reasons why, then you're probably not in the right environment.
mm.
And yeah, we would always try to just start with first principles. Back to, the way that we set up Skin+Me, like the reason that you get your daily doser in the post and the reason it's got your name like etched into the metal is because we started with first principles. Okay, well, what's the information that we need to convey? Okay, legally it's XYZ. Right. Well, at the moment you get it written on a little piece of paper, which from a pharmacy, which isn't very pretty. And so we challenge ourselves, okay, well, can we etch it into metal? And that was a bit of a crazy thought at the time, but turns out there was no law stopping us using metal instead of paper. And so that led to us like coming up with this awesome idea and then figuring out how to take it out into the world. We also had, because we had such a high quality team, we could raise enough capital that meant we could have the breathing space on some of these decisions
Yeah,
to not have to rush them. If you have to
yeah,
rush decisions because we're going to be out of money in a
yeah.
month, then you're probably going to compromise them.
Interesting. And so it all starts with good team, right? So you've said that's one of your strengths. You're a good early CEO in part because you're able to get this early team together. We talked when we were talking about poker, the ability to actually the ability to convince someone to leave a very comfortable, high paying job with a nice pension to join this super risky, but we're going to shoot for the stars type company being, clearly a strength of yours. I'm interested though in hiring specifically. So we hear so much about how hiring's difficult, like it's guessing, it's this, you got to hire quickly, fire even quicker, all that sort of stuff. What makes you excuse me, what makes you so good at recruitment and hiring? Is there anything that you can pass on to our listeners, any kind of rules that you have around hiring or ways that you conduct your hiring processes to kind of make you one of the best people at this?
Well, I'd say I'm still like way off where I want to be at it, but the reason I've done okay at it is I'd say I've always got an active recruiting posture.
Okay.
So if I'm at an event, whatever it is, if I see something on LinkedIn, I'm always reaching out to people and always trying to line up a conversation because that pipeline of people that you're nurturing just A, it's very hard to build, and
Mm,
B, the stars have to align when you're looking for someone, and so you kind of want to have them in a warm funnel. And a
mm,
lot of people won't be available. You might have uprooted their family, moved to New Zealand, and so you just need to be constantly on the lookout. I'd say that I yeah, I try to understand. I just dig into someone a bit. Like, what do they enjoy doing in their spare time? And how obsessive are they as a person? Right? Have they just like rode the Atlantic as a one man band and then done some of the crazy stuff? And if so, they probably love taking on big challenges and they'll stop at nothing to achieve them. Are they what type of questions do they ask? I think that's so important. Like even when you're interviewing someone, if they ask
mm,
like very generic questions, or do they ask questions that show that if they were in this team, they'd be
mm.
giving me as the CEO or the leader the confidence that they're really identifying problems that I haven't thought of and they're really challenging the
I'm
status
pushing you.
quo.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly, and they're all like great early signals, and of course, like intelligence is a non-negotiable. But I think that that is it's easier to come by intelligence. It's much harder to come by that obsessive
Mm.
resilience, challenge the status quo mentality. And if you can combine the two, you've got great potential early stage pedigree.
Interesting, because you're going to be doing this exercise soon with your new company, set S3, unless you've already done it behind the scenes. Because I could find nothing about this, so you've done a great job of
Yeah.
remaining completely stealth on this. I know that it's consumer health, so again, health interest. I know it's called S3. That's everything that I know. So, if you're willing to share anything, great. If not, what can you share on the new company, or even the thesis, even the problem you're looking to solve, or something along those lines?
Yeah, this is it's gonna be interesting talking about this without saying what it is, but it's something that we all use every day. It's a category that it's a health problem that affects 1 in 3 people,
Mm,
and there's an incumbent at the moment that is owned by a major consumer health group, and the product doesn't work for all of those 1 in 3 people. So a lot of people go untreated. Yet, and that's because they're using technology that they acquired 20 years ago and they haven't improved on it. So what we've done, back to the team point, is we've recruited the 2 key individuals that were at that company
amazing.
for the last like 10, 15 years. And they were pivotal in one of the cases, the leadership and the growth. And number two, from an R&D, they led R&D there. So we brought those people together. We've spent the last sort of 6 to 8 months developing a superior technology. We've patented it. Well, it's patents pending, and we're now building out the rest of the components that we need. And so it's a 41 billion pound category.
Oof.
Um, we're super excited about it. We've already got some great investors on board. If any of your listeners interested in learning, learning more, they can add me on LinkedIn, send me a friend request, and just put a maybe write S3 in the text box, and yeah, would love to share more. But we're just a few weeks away from revealing
Mm.
what exactly we're up to.
So it may or may not have been released when this goes live, but if not, I mean, you're getting me guessing as to what that might even be. I don't even know. What's the biggest problem that you're gonna have to solve? Do you think in the new company?
Well, the incumbent has been around for a while, and they've been throwing a lot of marketing pounds
Yeah,
at people believing that they're the only solution. So at the moment,
right,
from all the focus groups have been doing, people assume that that's just as good as it gets, and they've got a lot of
right.
professional recommendations that lead to the trust in that brand. So that is, no matter how good and capable we are, that is a hard obstacle to get over. But we've got a strategy that we feel will, bit by bit, enable us to get that same level of trust and professional endorsement, should I say? But I'd say that is the hardest part to achieve, but it has the biggest leverage on our success.
Love it. Um, it's funny. I say this quite a lot to people that if you want to have a good idea of what you could invent or a company that you could build in healthcare, just look at something that's been exactly the same for 150 years and just create a version on any first principle like, that might make this slightly better. The chances are it's going to make it a heck of a lot better. Many medical devices fall into that category that have just been exactly the same for so unbelievably long that no one thinks there's a better way.
Yeah, I completely agree, James. I mean, I've basically committed my career now to looking at like It's
Mm,
stuff that we already use that isn't good enough.
yeah.
How do we level that up? It's not completely reinventing the wheel. It's just dramatically improving the wheel.
Yeah. Is that what you think your career is going to be now? Is that what you're looking to do? Is then just this to the next, to the next, to the next, and just keep making these
Yeah, well,
improvements?
I am definitely intrigued in developing or acquiring IP that hasn't been commercialized that is maybe solving completely new problems. So I'm learning a bit about that, but I've kind of got my hands full at the moment with because at Skin and Me, we don't just have Skin and Me now, we have Hair and Me, which is a hair
Oh yeah, I was going to
regrowth
ask you about that. I've run out of
sub-brand as
time, but
well.
yeah,
We have Renew and Me, which is another
yeah,
brand. And we're also gearing up for some really exciting growth initiatives this year. So I've got my hands full between that and S3.
nice. Um, the role as chairman then in Skin and Me and the new company. Um, what makes a good chairman? I mean, how do you spend your time as chairman? And I mean, it differs obviously greatly from CEO, not being in the weeds of everything day to day. But yeah, how you can't stack too many of those roles, right?
No, you can. Well, you can be quite a few. You can have quite a few chairman roles if you're only non-exec. But at Skin
Mm,
and Me, I'm non-exec, which is primarily a board's role.
mm,
At S3, I'm an exec chairman. So, very grandiose title for an early stage team. But it basically me, my co-founder's CEO, and I'm supporting in a lot of ways from recruiting the early team,
mm,
setting the strategy, bringing in key partners to the business, bringing in the individuals I mentioned from the big incumbent,
mm,
fundraising, and some other areas of the business that also fall under my wheelhouse. So
mm.
it's still a very active role. You just don't have the expectations of being the day-to-day CEO. But
Amazing.
it also varies so much. An exec chairman, it's a title like president in the US. Like
Yeah.
they don't
Okay.
have chairman, they
Okay.
have presidents, and that's like the
Sure.
right hand to the CEO. But
Sure.
you kind of shape the role around the way you add the most value.
Sure. And final question, James, before I let you go. I know you got to go in 1 minute. What what are you most excited about at the minute? Whether it's a role, whether it's a person you're bringing in, whether it's a technology, whether it's something you might do in future. What is the one thing that you're super excited about when you think about it today?
I mean, hands down, it's S3, the new brand that I'm taking to market. I mean, it's been most of this last year in the making, and I just love this stage. Like
Mm,
something that doesn't exist in the world yet. You've brought all these people together. You put a load of work into it. You can never be certain it's going to work. We
mm,
didn't even know Skin Me would work. We had very high confidence, but the market loves to kick you in the face when you've made an assumption, and that's definitely happened plenty times to me in
mm,
my journey. Might happen here, but
mm.
I don't think it will. I think given the experience I've got from Skin and Me and the rest of my career, I feel like we're laying the foundation in the right way.
I would agree. I would agree. Good to be humble, but if there is an opportunity to invest, give me a shout. James, been a pleasure. Thank you so much. If people want to get in touch with you, you've already mentioned you can add James on LinkedIn. You can put S3 in the little request there, and maybe say that you've listened to this podcast. But yeah, James, we'll put that in the show notes, link to your LinkedIn and stuff. But it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much.
Yeah, likewise. I really enjoyed the questions. Thanks for your time, James.